So, Cory Sandhagen just 50-45 Rob Font. Rob Font stepped in on short notice, and Cory Sandhagen is usually considered quite an entertaining fighter, or at least not a boring fighter at all. However, against Rob Font, he did put on a snooze fest where he pretty much only grappled Rob, and some people were flaming him, but a lot of people forgave him right off the bat, because we know usually Cory is more entertaining to watch than that. Usually he likes going for his flying knees, and he has some good highlight reels. He also has some good losses, honestly, against Jan or Dillashaw. You could even argue that he won the fight against TJ based on damage, which makes sense to me. But even when he loses, he can be entertaining. And Sandhagen is quite the beloved fighter at the moment, so a lot of people don't have that much trouble forgiving him. And in this video, I'm just going to talk about why it's sometimes okay to be boring and how it could really pay off also. Now, for the first point, this is MMA. Not boxing, not kickboxing. Wrestling is a part of the sport, okay? How are we gonna call ourselves mixed martial arts fans, but every time someone goes for a takedown or wrestles someone, we cry? But of course, there are more entertaining grapplers like Khabib. Like, people say Khabib just laid on top of his opponents or cuddled them. Like, that's actually retarded. Or like Islam Makhachev, who literally has like one of the highest finish rates in the UFC. But that's just irrational hate for Dagestanis. You can make a whole nother video about that. And Khamzat Chimaev is also an excellent example of a grappler actually being really entertaining. But to be fair, of course Cory didn't put on an entertaining grappling clinic. First of all, I believe that we should mention the fact that Cory injured his triceps, so he couldn't do the normal Sandhagen stuff. So that is another reason why he just opted for grappling. And is it just me, or can you actually like appreciate the grappling? Because of course Cory is a striker, but I can also appreciate a striker expanding their skill set and going for some takedowns. So this isn't the first time we've seen him using his offensive wrestling. He also used it against Cheeto. But this is the first time, I believe at least, this is the first time that we have seen him dominate someone with wrestling. And guys, no matter if it was boring or not, 50-45, 5-0. That's quite the gap between you and the opponent in terms of skill, at least. Now, he didn't destroy Rob Font, he didn't really hurt him, but in the end, he won all 5 rounds with relative ease, with the same approach. You could actually criticize Rob Font, because what Cory was doing was working over and over and over again, and you should have expected Rob Font to be able to deal with Cory and to be able to make reads and make changes and make adjustments. But in the end, we got a bit of a snooze fest by Cory. I'm not angry at Cory or anything, and honestly, it was a smart thing for Cory to do. Think about it in the octagon. This was probably one of the fights where he took the least damage. So the pros of fighting like this is, number 1, you don't take any damage. Number 2, you win 50-45. There's no discussion about how this fight went. And number 3, just imagine you guys in the octagon, like with another man that wants to take your head off. Like, yeah, the boxing and kickboxing is like fun and there's adrenaline, but sometimes you just want to grapple so you don't get punched in the face. And I think everyone has a right to not want to get punched in the face. So sometimes you should just go for a smart route, you know, especially a guy like Cory, who is usually like not a boring fighter. He can get away with it, and he's 31. He is making a push for the title. Him fighting boring clearly benefited him. I mean, 5-0. And another example I have of someone where it's actually sometimes smart when they fight boring is Israel Adesanya. Now, Adesanya is one of the most hated fighters at the moment, and a lot of people call him boring, and I think he's not as boring as people actually say he is. But he can definitely put on a snooze fest or two, and I say this as a like massive Adesanya fan. He's literally top 3 of all time for me personally, at least. And Adesanya, he came into the UFC, made his debut against Rob Wilkinson. That lasted 2 rounds, not even 2 rounds. That was an entertaining fight. When he fought Marvin for the first time, it was an okay fight, not boring but not very entertaining. When he fought Brett Tavares, where he put on a striking clinic over 5 rounds. Next was the fight with Derek Brunson, where it just took him 1 round to TKO him. This is where I became an Adesanya fan, because that was just such a beautiful TKO. He hit him with a knee, a question mark kick, straight hook, everything, and it was just beauty. It was just flowing, man. But anyways, I'm starting to ramble. Then he fought Anderson Silva. They went to a decision, Adesanya winning 3-0 and 2-1 on the judges' scorecards respectively. And this was a tactical chess match, and I was already seeing some people say the fight was trash, the fight was ass, but honestly these people, they just don't understand striking, I think, because how could this fight be called boring? They also didn't understand the occasion, the passing of the torch. Then he fought Calvin Gastelum, and man, that was a war to this day, one of my favorite fights. Adesanya actually got hurt in that fight twice, but he hurt Gastelum like a million times in the last round and won that one. Next he went against Robert Whittaker, and of course we all know what happened. He dropped him at the end of round 1, and in round 2 he finished it and KO'd Whittaker. Next was a fight with Romero, and this was actually a fight where Adesanya was flamed for being boring, but to be honest you also have to put some blame on Yoel Romero. The soldier of God, the statue of God is what they call him, like, of a frozen one. I know that's Tyron Woodley, but fits here. Next was Paulo Costa. That was entertaining, guys, come on, it didn't even take him 2 rounds to completely dismantle Costa. And from now on, some of the boring fights are being sprinkled in. His fight against Blachowicz, where he pretty much got dominated. That was not the most entertaining fight, but what could he do? He was outmatched. Marvin Vettori 2 was boring. Izzy won 5-0. However, Izzy didn't like dominate him. It wasn't an all-out washout. Like, the rounds were close, but they weren't close enough. So Izzy still won 5 rounds, but those 5 rounds were all competitive. At least that's what I would say. Then the second Whittaker fight. You could argue that fight is boring. It was a bit of a chess match. Personally, I liked the fight. I did not get bored at all. Then Jared Cannonier. That fight was boring. I'll admit that as an Adesanya fan. Alex Pereira won. I don't think that fight was boring. We had a couple of big moments. And of course, we had that spectacular round 5 finish for Alex. And the rematch. We all know what happened in the rematch. There was... To this day, okay, it's only 4 months ago, why am I saying to this day? But that's literally one of my favorite wins, if not my favorite win ever. Yeah, honestly, that's my favorite win ever. And as we've seen, sometimes fighting boring can really benefit you. Because Adesanya has been through a war with Gastelum, and sometimes you don't want to go through these walls over and over again. It's also not good for your health. You don't want to take that many punches to the face. Honestly, just not wanting to take a lot of punches to the face just makes sense to me. And that's that. Also, another point why sometimes being boring is okay is that people forget. Honestly,
are you intoxicated or something?
When you hear George St. Pierre, what do you think of? You usually think of GOAT, or at least he's in the top 3 or top 5 of GOATs. By the way, I will do a GOAT list 100%. And GSP is thought of as one of the greatest of all time. However, if you take a look at GSP's record, you will see decision on decision on decision. And if you watch the GSP fights, you will see that most of them honestly aren't that entertaining. Like, usually he had a couple of leg kicks, he jabbed you away from distance, a Superman punch, double leg takedown, some control, and he did get his fair share of finishes, especially in the early days against Matt Hughes or Matt Serra in the rematches, and also Michael Bisping when he came back. But most of his fights were won by unanimous decision, usually controlled the fight and won quite easily, and he didn't take damage. It was a very smart, very sort of scientific approach. And sure, people back in the day thought he was boring, this guy can't finish people, but who says that today? Like, no one gives a shit at the end of the day. That's what I feel like. And we also have an example from another sport, that is Floyd Money Mayweather. 50-0 boxer, one of the greatest of all time, blah blah blah. He was not one of the most entertaining fighters, okay? Like, I'm not a boxing expert, I'm not calling him flat out boring, but I'm pretty sure there are way more entertaining fighters out there.